Every religion can be divided into two parts, one of which may be called the non-essential and the other the essential. Doctrines, dogmas, rituals, ceremonies, and mythologies of all the organized religious creeds come under the head of the non-essential. It cannot be said that they are absolutely necessary for making one live a purely spiritual life. The non-essentials of religion are like a huge heap of husks, under which lies hidden the kernel of the essential truth. Wherever there is too much of non-essentials, there prevail religious corruption, superstition, and false theology, the main object of which is to convince the ignorant masses that the heap of non-essential dogmas, doctrines, ceremonies, and rituals must be observed by all who wish to be religious. A man or a woman may be highly spiritual without performing any of the rituals and ceremonies ordained, either by the scriptures of the world, or by any religious hierarchy. A man or a woman may be truly religious without believing in any creed, doctrine, dogma, or mythology. Those who understand the essentials of religion and strictly follow them in their everyday life do not disturb themselves about the non-essentials. These simple and sincere souls alone reach the goal of religion by the shortest way possible. The essentials of religion are principally two: self-knowledge and self-control. Self-knowledge means knowledge of the higher self, the divine nature of man. And self-control is the restraint of the lower self or selfish nature. True knowledge of the divine self comes when the lower self is subdued. In India, the ancient seers of truth understood the essential part of religion so well that they tried their best to keep it separate from the non-essential part of the popular religion of the masses. The result of such attempts was the discovery of the system of yoga. The science of yoga explains what self-control is, how it can be acquired, and what is the nature of self-knowledge. It is pure and simple. The system of yoga deals entirely with the essentials of religion. It does not teach any dogma, creed, ritual, ceremony, or mythology. A true yogi is one who has perfect control over himself and who has acquired self-knowledge. A yogi therefore reaches the ultimate goal of religion and spiritual perfection without wasting his energy in the practice of non-essentials. Self-control. Self-control means the control of the lower self, or the animal nature of man, by developing the higher powers that are latent in the individual soul. Self-control is not manifested in the character of any man who ignorantly obeys the dictates of the senses and blindly serves the internal masters of passion, anger, greed, self-delusion, pride, and egotism. Those who are constantly guided by sudden waves of passion, anger, pride, jealousy, and hatred are always disturbed in their minds. They are restless and unhappy. How can persons who are slaves of their senses expect happiness? Happiness comes in the state of perfect freedom and not in slavery. That freedom again can be acquired only through the practice of self-control. The attainment of self-control is easy for those who have learned to study their own minds and who, after discovering their weaknesses, try to reform their own characters. Like the lower animals, the natural tendency of human beings is to seek pleasure and to avoid pain. As long as man lives in the darkness of ignorance and cannot trace the causes which make him happy or unhappy, and as long as he does not understand whether happiness and pleasure come from external objects or from within, so long he fails to be master of himself. Right discrimination of the conditions which make one happy or unhappy is the surest guide in the path which leads to the attainment of self-control. Let us examine the present conditions of our minds. They are naturally attracted by the objects which are pleasing to the senses, or which help in fulfilling the purposes and desires that are extremely strong in us. The majority of mankind are attached to those objects which give pleasure, both sensuous and mental. They are never attached to anything or anybody where they do not find pleasure. In the same manner, it can be shown that the natural tendency of the mind is also to get away from pain. Many people enjoy curious flavors and high seasoning, and others are disgusted by them. Some people enjoy the burning sensation in the tongue and throat produced by red pepper, while others feel pain from it and shun it. The same color or same sound or taste which is pleasing to one may be a source of intense discomfort to another. This shows that pleasure and pain are not the inherent properties of the objects of senses, but that they depend upon the conditions of the mind and body which come in direct contact with those objects. The same mind which found pleasure in a certain thing at one time dislikes the very sight of that thing, if new ideas happen to get a hold upon it. It can be said that there is nothing in the universe from which all individuals can derive absolute pleasure or absolute pain, or that can even please the same individual at all times. Those who seek pleasure from the objects of senses cannot stick to one particular enjoyment at the time. If they try to enjoy the same thing day after day, they will soon tire of it. Satiety is the inevitable result, and with that comes loss of interest. The tendency of our mind is to seek objects that are more pleasing than those which we already possess or happen to enjoy. And the moment we find a thing which we think would produce a more agreeable sensation than the things we now have, we crave to possess it. We are attached to those objects from relation with which we derive pleasure. But the moment these objects cease to yield us gratification, we become indifferent to the very things we so eagerly desired. Sometimes we grow to hate them and wish to get away from them. Our minds are constantly seeking new objects of pleasure through the gates of the senses, and attach themselves to every fresh object that promises to give us a pleasant feeling or sensation. While this attachment lasts, the mind becomes a slave to it. If anything happens to come in the way and prevent the mind from enjoying a particular pleasure, the mind tries to overcome the obstacle. The stronger the opposing power, the greater is the mental struggle to subdue it. If the desire be very strong, and we cannot succeed in gratifying it by ordinary means, we often get enraged and adopt more violent measures, thus losing all possibility of a peaceful state of mind. That simple desire for enjoyment takes the form of a ruling passion, agitates the whole mind, and manifests in the form of anger and unrest. In that agitated state of the mind, we lose the sense of right and wrong, memory grows dull, understanding gets confused, we lose foresight and act like brutes. Desire is the first stage, passion is the second stage, and the third stage is anger. Passion and anger, again, lead to hatred, jealousy, and many other wicked feelings, which are expressed outwardly in the form of vicious acts. He who can control his mind from being disturbed by passion and anger has obtained self-control. The control of passions and anger comes when the mind does not seek pleasure from external objects, but learns by experience that pleasure which can be derived through the senses is very transient. It lasts for a few seconds only, and its true source is not in the object itself, but depends mostly upon the mental and physical conditions of the enjoyer.